Welcome to Mantle Mondays. I'm Amit Jethani, one of the co-founders here at Mantle, where we're building the infrastructure for private investments. Today, I'm sitting down with Phil Jacobson, who is the head of operations at Tensor Labs. We'll talk about why that's in past tense in a bit. Phil, thanks for joining us. First of all, congratulations on the acquisition. Keep listening if you want to hear a little bit more about what the acquiring company is and more. We'll get into that. Let's kick things off by learning about your background. Most people in ops, myself included, uh, don't start here. I think we sort of inherit the role or we build it or it gets handed to you or it comes out of a place of necessity where there are gaps in an org and people need to fill it. I'm curious, like, what was your journey like that ultimately led you into the ops space
Yeah,
at Tensor?
how I even fell into ops. I mean, I guess today I'm probably in an even more evolved type of capacity, which we get into later. But when I went to hashtag paid, I kind of joined first in more of a product focused role, but really partnering with the founder and CEO Brian to help him build and scale up the company. That role naturally ended up looking like an operations role, and so my title kind of shifted into VP of operations. At hashtag paid, that ended up meaning overseeing a lot of different functions. We can go into those details. It's kind of, I found my way in there. I think that operations means something very different at every single company. Sometimes ops is like really in the weeds and more of like a junior execution function. Sometimes like biz ops is more of like a strategic role that sits in between a series of different functions. Then you've got the VP ops and COO, and that can mean something different at every company. I've read countless articles about the different types of COOs and so on and so forth. I think really I like to pride myself on being decent at most functions. And I think that is what an ops person is usually good at. They're not the best CMO. They're not the best head of people or whatever it might be, but they're like not bad at it. And they can build up the foundation and then maybe replace themselves with an actual specialist who's the executive of that sub function. And then maybe oversee that function with that executive in the role. And I think that's where I kind of fell into it. And so when I decided to go to Tensor, they were like a hyper technical team and they needed a counterpart with the founders to help them take off all the stuff on their plates that was not product and engineering. And that was something that, I was well suited for. I had overseen product and engineering actually in the past. But in this case, you could meld yourself to the need of the business. And I found the business interesting. So the fit was really strong.
Funny enough, it's quite similar to my own background, coming from the world of engineering, then product, and now
Cool.
operations. Um, And good point about like how ops ends up being a good generic catch-all for tons and tons of different functions. I also see like rev ops and sales ops. I'm even seeing like customer ops, right? So there's fundamentally a lot of different uh, required pieces to make a startup go. And sometimes you just need a Swiss Army knife, right? Even if it's not the best tool for the job. So you leave Pump Up, you join hashtag paid. Let's dig into that a little bit. What was that transition like being like a co-founder to being an operator somewhere else?
You're dating me now because that was quite a long time ago, but that's all right. Yeah, listen, like that was an identity crisis for me, right? At that time, Pump Up was the first thing I did. We took it as far as we could. It was like an amazing experience. I learned a lot, both things that really work well and also like what not to do. I started with my co-founder out of university. So that was, I was 21 when we started that. And by the time I had stepped back from Pump Up, I was probably about 27 or so. So it was 5 or 6 years. And I did the cliche thing and I hit the road and took some time off life and I backpacked by myself through Southeast Asia and I had a good time for a few months in Thailand and Vietnam and Cambodia, just exploring the world and myself and who I am. Cause I think your identity gets really tied into this idea of being a founder. And I put it in quotations because like I always feel as though I'm an entrepreneur and I am a founder, but I kind of came to the realization on that, self-discovery trip, for lack of a better description, um, that really what I was looking for was, how do you work with like amazing people? How do you continue to accelerate your learning? How do you make sure that you can be in an environment where you are able to make a really big impact? And how do you put yourself in a opportunity where hopefully there's also some really great personal upside? And really those are the things I was looking for. I was looking to work with people that I could be challenged by, that I could challenge, that would work really well together. I was looking to accelerate my learning and make sure that like I could look back 6 months ago and laugh at how much I thought I knew and come. And if I don't feel as though I can do that, am I really developing at the rate that I should be? I still believe that to be true. And so when I came back home and started to think about what do I do next, it went from what company do I start to, well, what fits that framework? And maybe that means starting a company. Maybe that means joining a company. Maybe that means going into venture. Maybe that means doing consulting. Like it could be, those are just manifestations of this kind of framework or this idea of, versus when I went after Pump Up into this like in between phase, it was like, okay, you have to start a company because you're an entrepreneur. And I think that can be a dangerous line of thinking, unless you really have the hunger for a specific idea that like only you can go solve, because it's a tough journey to start and run a company. And I think if you're not like extremely passionate about the problem that you're solving, when shit hits the fan, which it always does at some point and probably many points, it's tough to fight through that if you're not um, like deeply passionate about making this thing come to life. And yeah, that was kind of a helpful way of thinking. And so when I went to Hashtag Paid, uh, it felt as entrepreneurial as possible because of the way that I came into the organization and my relationship with Brian, which actually was like an advisor for Hashtag Paid. So I knew them before for a few years and kind of saw the excellence that Brian has as a CEO and a founder. And it really fit the framework that I had thought about for myself. So the transition was, by the time I went there, quite exciting.
Makes me think of two different things. First of all, even though it sounds like the most common cliche out there, a lot of people who enjoy their jobs say it's because of other people, right? And I feel that makes a lot more sense when you're the entrepreneur, you're at a small startup, you're in a small team, and everyone really needs to pull their weight. So chances are they're pretty good. And that's always like a great team to work with, right? Like, because they energize you and they push you, and hopefully you could do the same for them. Uh, Also reminds me of a quote from Naval. I'm going to butcher the quote, but at least the spirit of it is what I remember. He says something to the effect of, once you're an entrepreneur, you're effectively unemployable anywhere else because you don't want to work for anyone else anymore. How do you feel about that?
Make sure that you have enough equity in the company that you join where you feel as though you have really great upside and ownership in the business and you can get over that hump. I think if you don't, then that would ring true.
That makes a lot of sense. Awesome. Let's transition to your world at Tensor. Walk us through how you ended up there. What made you say yes? Were you considering other opportunities versus Tensor? Or was it more like, hey, this is something cool?
I've never told this story outside of like some friends, but yeah, I was spending a lot of time personally in the crypto space in kind of my nights and weekends. So I was, working the 12-hour days or whatever it requires to run a company and scale it. And I was like super passionate about Hashtag Paid. And frankly, I still am today. I'm like very bullish on what they're doing and how far the company's come. It's an amazing company. Um, and I loved it, but I had found that kind of in like 2021, 2022, 2023, I had spent an increasing amount of time uh, going deep into blockchain and crypto and like all the crazy stuff happening on chain. And it was like super, super interesting to me. Um, and the deeper I went, the more like gravity was pulling me in saying, hey, maybe you should be in this world full time. And I kind of had this interesting moment where when the FTX crash happened, had just about a year before started to like discover the Solana ecosystem. And Solana went to like $8 from like 200 something dollars, right? And everyone said it was over. But what I was observing with a lot of the time that I was spending in my nights and weekends engaging this world was actually like all the best developers, or a lot of the best developers, were flocking to Solana despite the price action and like the negative headlines that existed in the media. A lot of really smart people were flocking to this ecosystem. I actually started to double down my time and attention in that space and get really like deep into that world. Personally, while everyone seemingly was walking away, but if you actually paid attention, it had the fastest growing developer community and the second most amount of developers next to Ethereum. And typically where the developers go, the applications come, or the applications come that are interesting, the users come, the opportunity comes. And so I observed that in like late 22, early 23, and just went pretty deep. And by like late 23, I was quite invested financially into the space. And I had like built an interesting position in the Solana token, and so on. Had a lot of friends in this ecosystem by this point. I had angel invested into Tensor and a couple other companies that I had met just through my network. And so I decided, you know what? I'm going to meet all the people I've been chatting with online for like the last few years. And I bought a ticket to Amsterdam to go to Solana's Breakpoint conference and by myself. And I flew there and met all my internet friends, some of which I didn't even know their real identities. And what I was shocked to find out was they were way sharper than I expected. And I expected them to be like interesting, but then I was like, oh, you're actually the founder of X. And oh, wow, your company is doing this. All this unbelievable innovation was happening. And I remember flying home from Breakpoint being like, huh, maybe I really should be in this world full time. Then I didn't do anything about it. It was just in my mind. I was thinking about that. And then a month later, I was at a dinner with the Tensor founders. And the day after that dinner, I got a call from Ilya, who's the CEO, saying, hey, would you consider joining us as our kind of like head of ops? I was like, huh, maybe. Like, let's talk in the new year, because I had some plans for the holidays. It's around Christmas time, 23. And, I thought about it. And my mind was like, my gut has been, the energy has been pulling me in. And now the world has presented something interesting. Maybe you should explore it. And so I explored it. And that's kind of how it all came to be.
The universe conspired to make it happen for you.
I've come to the conclusion that like, you can do your best to influence as much as you can, and you should, because you can influence the outcomes. Also, sometimes like luck and universe vibes have a place.
All of the above. Reminds me of something I read a while back, which is you should always pay attention to what engineers, nerds, and all the academic types work on in their evenings and weekends, because those are probably the big projects of the future.
And I don't even think I realized I was doing that. I just was, so yeah, totally.
Makes a lot of sense. So now that we have the benefit of understanding the history, and of course we know where things have headed, what was ops like at Tensor? You obviously took the opportunity, and how did it evolve from like the very early days when you first started there all the way through to, let's call it the finish line, for a lack of a better term, on the acquisition?
It was very different actually from Hashtag Paid. It was almost primarily legal, finance, compliance, and people, which all those larger buckets, actually, I didn't oversee at Hashtag Paid, which was really interesting. So for me, back to that original framework, what I was super excited by was how much learning there was to have. Like, I'm capable enough, I can figure things out, or I can surround myself with the people that like have the domain expertise I lack. Like, I'm not a lawyer, right? So I brought a fractional counsel. I learned so much from this person. They're unbelievable. And I like sing their praises and recommend them any day. I learned so much from them. And they're also like really enjoyable to work with. But yeah, the day-to-day was every single thing you do in the crypto space, you have to question like the approach and make sure that you feel confident in the compliance and legal position that you're taking in whatever products that you're building. And so that ended up being like a huge amount of time. I was on the phone with our Canadian counsel, our American counsel, offshore counsel, our in-house counsel, multiple times a day, every day. That was a huge piece of my time. The second huge piece of my time was ops and financial ops. So financial operations in crypto can be extremely complicated. You have money in many places. You have money on chain. You have money in various tokens. You need to distribute. You need to do payments. You need to run the financial operations of your business. So you end up having this like complex stack of financial apps to be able to like execute on like everything that needs to get executed on when it comes to running finance for your business. And so those two buckets took like an astronomical amount of time. But then there was also the basics of like, uh, what is our hiring process? What is our mission, vision, and values? What's our comp structure? What's our performance management system? All of the like people operations and company operations level systems that Tensor just never needed. But as we started to say, hey, we need to grow this team, you start to say, hey, like what is the version of that we need for today and maybe the next couple of years of growth? And so all those big buckets I was spending quite a lot of time on.
Rings a lot of bells when, we were ourselves looking into like, oh, what's the treasury policy going to be? And how are we going to manage, multi-sig wallets? And I think it was called like no safe back then. So with those years of experience, is there any lessons learned, anything you would change, or any advice you would give your younger self on that exact path?
I feel very grateful how everything turned out. So I would like to say no, I wouldn't change anything. I think the advice was like, it was really hard for me to step down from #paid. I really loved it. I love the team. Brian and I are very good friends, and became very, very close friends. Also, like, I really liked the company. I believed in the company. I wasn't looking to leave, but my personal gravity and interests pulled me in this direction, my kind of nights and weekends. And then the universe conspired, as we said before, to kind of present me something. And I actively was thinking about this exact idea as I was considering it. I was like, sometimes it's in front of you and you just have to decide if you take it or not. And despite how difficult it is to take, and those like in hindsight opportunities that maybe like really change the course of your life or whatever it might be, are obvious in hindsight, but without hindsight, they're actually not that obvious. And there's a million good reasons not to do it. And I went through, do you do it? Do you not do it? And, how did I end up coming to the decision to be like, okay, I'm gonna take this leap? My gut. Like I was like, this is the nerdiest thing ever. It's kind of embarrassing if this is because this is recorded, but I once watched this video in like the early 2010s of Bezos talking about his regret minimization framework, which all it means is, all it is a fancy way of saying, I should say, try to make decisions where you'll minimize your regret. Definitely that had somewhere in the back of my mind had a place to play when I decided to join Tensor, which was, I think, I will regret not knowing what could have been if I don't take this opportunity. And I think I need to make sure I don't live with that regret. And, obviously it worked out. So in hindsight, it's like, good job. Could have not worked out. But I like to think that had it not worked out, taking the path of minimizing regret and following your instinct in the long term eventually will work out either way.
That was a pretty popular talk. It also kind of aligns with just general human psychology of like, we end up regretting the actions we don't take as opposed to the ones we do. So it makes a lot of sense. Let's dig in a little bit into one specific operational thing that you were responsible for at Tensor, which was the cap table. And as Tensor grew and went through its journey, bringing on investors, advisors, stakeholders, and more, how did your cap table evolve? What was that complexity like? At what point did you say, we got to go beyond a spreadsheet and need something real?
It was one of the first things that I did. So I came in and the cap table was a spreadsheet. I put in quotations because it was like missing stuff, right? We took some recent checks in. Are they in the piece of paper that we've maintained? Like, there's not a way to have like you need a source of truth for a cap table. It's quite important, right? And I think that like we often outsource this to lawyers. I have found lawyers are not the best mathematicians, and there's a lot of calculations that you need to do to make sure these things are done perfectly. So you need a tool. And so when I came in, I was like, okay, we don't have a tool. I asked the founders, I'm like, is this something we should solve? They're like, yeah, we were waiting for you to come here to solve it. So solve it. I was like, okay, I'll solve it. So then for me, it was like, okay, what tool do you decide to use? But it was one of the first things that I did because I think if we were to raise a future round of financing or were to sell the company or anything to do with the equity of the business, you must know exactly the situation that you sit in Plus, I knew we were going to scale the company. That means I need to know how many shares are in the stock or options are in the stock option pool so that we can issue stock options out and to make it really easy for people who get stock options to know how much they have and to be able to exercise them when they need to, and like all of the complexities that come with managing a cap table. And so, yeah, it was one of the first things I did, which is how we connected.
Exactly. Tensor went on to becoming a Mantle client. So could you walk us through that decision-making process of why you chose Mantle and how you used it once you were set up?
Yeah, so I was going down the Carbo route because that's what I knew. And had heard Pulley. Is that a company? Pulley? I heard Pulley was interesting. So I did calls with both of them. Carta was expensive. And there was some challenges with Carta. Like I know if I don't know, maybe it changed now to be fair to them, but it was difficult to get your data out of Carta should you want to switch. The cost was like quite aggressive, especially even versus Pulley. And I never had like a terrible experience with Carta, but it was never like something I was going to like call home about and be like, wow, this is like the best UX I've ever had. Right. There's like a lot to be desired. Um, and, but I was like, okay, whatever, you solve the problem. But then I was talking to, I wish I could tell you who, somebody, a Canadian founder of sorts. I don't know which one. And they're like, oh, you've got to try Mantle. And I was like literally in the decision-making process. I was like, okay, they're Canadian guys. Sounds cool. Like I don't have like a huge commitment to using Carta per se. So I guess I got connected. I think it was with you, did a demo. What I liked about Mantle was I think that a lot of the desires I had with like how do you visualize the data and really like see it at scale and see how it all changes over time and who has what and how does it all interface together over the tranches of the fundraisers that you do. How is the experience for the end user that gets options or gets shares and how can they interface with it? How can I like see really good change logs over time? How do I minimize my DocuSigns and my, stack of tools I need to use to be able to like actually get documents done, to get board approvals done, all of the complexities that are involved with share issuance and option issuance. And it felt like to me that you guys had thought about the problem in like a pretty deep way. And while it was quite early, I think at the time, because I know there were some features that you didn't have that eventually came live. I forget which ones. It felt like there was like a really strong sense of craft put into the product that I hadn't seen in some of the competitive sets. Yeah, I took a risk. I remember actually our CEO said to me, why don't we just use the one that, has been around for a while? Like, it's going to work. Maybe this company won't exist in the year. And I said, my sense is they will, number one. And number two, it seems like a way better product. I'm like, I have to use it. So let me give it a shot. One thing that I loved about our conversation was you're like, hey, listen, we have this like venture capital standard format that you can like click a single button to get all your data and put into Carta if you hate it. And I was like, okay, that to me means like, as long as my switching cost is like quite low, then the risk is kind of like minimal. I can take the data that I put into the system and all the work we have to do to clean up all and get the stuff out of the documents into a tool. I can pull it and put it somewhere else if it doesn't work. I never had to do that, of course, but that was kind of the like confidence boost I needed to be able to say, okay, if you guys are confident enough that you're going to make it one click to leave, then I'm confident enough to give it a shot. And then I did, and I was like super happy. It was great. I never considered leaving ever. So, yeah.
Well, thank you for the kind words. That is feedback that the team will also appreciate. To your point, as a team, we've lived through the pain of cap tables, so we did go as deep as we possibly could to build out the platform. What advice would you give other founders who don't quite see the importance of getting their cap table organized in this way?
If I were to be starting a company from scratch, I would just start with Mantle from day one because then your system is organized. But I'm like quite an organized person. I think the advice I would say to a founder is either you'll feel the pain later or you avoid the pain by just setting up the system earlier. Eventually it's pain. When I had to reconcile everything and get it all into Mantle, it was like not trivial to do. It took a lot of time. It was super meticulous. You guys helped a lot. And like, I don't think I could have done it without the help of the success team. It was like a lot. Yeah, you guys were very helpful on that. But had the issue persisted longer, it would have been even, the worst case scenario is that like you have less ownership than you thought you did, or et cetera, et cetera. Like in the end of the day, you really need to know truth, right? Like we sold Tensor, and that cap table was an important thing to make sure was certain and perfect, because there was eventually like a financial distribution that had to go out to people, and like that to be right. And everyone who has a question that is getting a distribution that is a shareholder, they should have the right to say, like, to ask questions and make sure that they feel confident in those calculations and how everything was done. You simply like cannot achieve this to the degree of confidence that I believe you need to operate with high rigor. Um, Doing this in a spreadsheet, it's not that expensive. It's like totally fair. Card is really expensive, so I kind of get it. But um, Mantle was reasonable. Like I never thought twice about the price. It was like a reasonable cost.
We also now have a free plan for really early stage customers so they can just get going. It was introduced summer of last year, specifically for companies that are incubated and really small. And
If you do it right from day one, and then your life will be easier. And there's enough bullshit happening in your company, like dealing with cap table mishaps is like a huge waste of time. It adds no value to the success of your business. So like, why create space for that to exist?
mistakes are also very expensive. We've seen this firsthand time and time again. They have to go and reissue securities, button up the transfers and with missing resolutions and so on and so forth. It can be a lot. Um, so there's probably a question a bunch of our viewers are waiting for is tell us about the exit.
We sold Tensor to Coinbase, which I presume most people have heard of. Um, yeah, it was a great experience. That was my first exit. So at least inside of a company that I was an operator or an executive at. Yeah, it was an amazing experience. Like I learned a ton. It in hindsight was like pretty quick. I think from like term sheet to getting the deal done was 3 months. But I think that these things come to life over time. Now, to be fair, once we had signed the term sheet, then I got involved and like I worked with Richard and Nelia to drive that process, like, you know, in the trenches. And when I say trenches, it's a tough process. It's a lot of work, a lot of long hours. You're already working long hours, but it's even longer hours. And it's not like the most fun work. Maybe the end state is theoretically exciting, but the journey to get there, once you sign that term sheet, is like diligence is no joke. It's a lot of work. And that's where I spent a lot of time and learned a lot. It was a great experience. But I think, we built Vector, which was a token trading product, and we launched it at the end of 2024. And it took off. It went from $0 in volume a day to $20 million in volume a day being traded on this platform within 2 months. It was very crazy. And the user growth was amazing. The retention was amazing. We were the first ones that took an approach that kind of made token trading social. And that was kind of our two core differentiators was social and mobile. No one had built a great mobile trading product. And for like actually trading, not just like buying a few tokens, but anything that trades on chain. And no one had built a great social product. There have been a lot of like experiments, some that did like well and lasted a short while. And so we took like a really differentiated approach with the idea of like broadcasting your trades and letting people copy trade you and sharing context and insight as to why you were making trades, like all of these fun social ideas. Built a following graph, built an algorithmic feed, did our best to like on the front end of the UI, highlight what was interesting and all of these different things. It really, people took a liking to it. We launched it cross chain. So one of the core chains that we integrated with was Base, and Base is Coinbase's blockchain. And so they knew us a little bit from this relationship. I remember actually seeing Brian Armstrong joined Vector, and he was playing around with the product like a month or two after it was launched. Everybody who was in crypto had at least tried the product if they weren't actually using it. And you had to sync with your Twitter. So I actually knew it was Brian because like it was his actual Twitter. I remember a friend of mine messaged me, said, "Yo, did you see Brian Armstrong join Vector?" And I was like, "Oh, cool. I didn't see." And he showed me. And the next message that we had caught up on was actually him sharing the link to the acquisition announcement. And I was like, wow, this is the funniest chat ever. We hadn't spoken like 10 months. And so, the relationship ultimately starts way earlier than you even realize it starts, right? We integrated Base. You don't need a relationship with them to do so. But, we had one and we did some co-marketing together. We were like super friendly with the team. And I think come the summertime, we started speaking with them a little bit about what it would look like to bring social trading and, on-chain trading into Coinbase. That's like one of their big priorities last year and continues to be this year. And we were just an amazing team when it came to building on-chain trading products. Our on-chain trading products were super fast, well enjoyed, well used, et cetera, et cetera. And so, from our perspective, the fit was just like really strong to go say, hey, can we take the technology and product that we built, and yeah, we'll lose the Vector brand, but we can take that tech and put it into the machine and scale that Coinbase has and kind of be the group that drives on-chain trading at, a platform like Coinbase. So we just thought it made like a ton of sense. The fit was strong. We really liked the team. Coinbase, tons of respect for them. The founders ultimately decided to pursue it, and that came together quickly. And then you actually had to get the deal done, but we did. And yeah, that was it.
Congrats. That sounds amazing and really well deserved too. Um, 3 months is an impressive timeline because, we're in the venture space and sometimes it takes that long to get a financing round done, let alone, an entire acquisition. So that is surprising, but impressive. And I remember like in the early days, MetaMask was like the wallet of choice. And then Coinbase came out with their mobile wallet. And I tried it and I thought, wow, this is
Yeah.
such an upgrade.
Yeah.
It's so much better than what was out in the market at the time. And this is recent history too, right? So, yeah, impressive team. So, what does your next chapter look like with this new team?
The TLDR is I didn't go to Coinbase personally. The team largely did. Um, really want to get back into the trenches and, earlier stage startups. I think that's like really where I find um, that's where I get a lot of personal enjoyment, I guess we can say. And I had connected with the Squads team, and Squads is the definitive multi-sig on Solana. There's about $15 billion of value locked in Squads contracts. They have effectively 100% market share when it comes to multi-sig. If you're a team building anything on Solana, you're securing assets, or you're securing token upgrade authorities or program upgrade authorities, or any of these like on-chain, you know, programs, you keep them in the Squads multi-sig. This is the way that you hold value on-chain. Just like you mentioned, Gnosis Safe on Ethereum, this is what Squads brought to Solana at the very beginning when Solana kind of launched and grew into becoming the like definitive player that owns multi-sig on Solana. So much so that they bought the multi-sig handle. They own multi-sig. It's a great handle on Twitter. And they have like an amazing engineering team, amazing product sense, amazing product taste. I was a big user of Squads because all of the assets for Tensor that we held on chain, of which I ran the treasury and all the finance at Tensor, a lot of that lived in Squads. So I was using Squads every single day. So I know that product inside and out, and I know financial operations inside and out. And so they started to work on a product called Altitude. What they observed with Squads was, people like me, these heads of ops, heads of finance, etc., started to use Squads as their treasury and started to like need to do payments and need to do bill pay and need to do payroll and want to get yield on their, stable coin, which is really like their treasury. And yeah, they're holding all these different tokens, but for anything when it comes to like euro or dollar denominated, stable coin or just currency, people start to use Squads as like a treasury and a financial operations platform. It works for that. But if you were to really solve the problem, like how do you build, a banking product effectively for on-chain finance, it would look a little bit different than Squads looks like. And so they decided, you know what, let's build a complementary product, Squads for tokens and programs, but Altitude for stablecoins and financial operations. And I started to talk to them about that in the fall while I knew the acquisition was coming to life. And there was just a really strong fit where they needed somebody to come in and partner with the founders to oversee Altitude from a business perspective and kind of take on all of the functions that are, not engineering and product in this case. And so, less legal and finance, but more marketing and sales and ops and GTM and RevOps and success and support and all of these things. And I love all of that type of work. And I really, um, one, double down on the space, and B, I'm quite bullish on the next generation of finance operating on crypto rails, specifically with stablecoins. I think like the developments we've seen in the US with some of the recent acts passed and the ones that hopefully will be passed this year have like legitimized this space and are, I think in hindsight, when we look back in like 5 years, it'll have been like that moment where, yeah, this was the beginning of this shift in stablecoins being like widely used to uh, A, hold dollars and then B, use dollars. But beyond dollars, so every country is going to have stablecoin for their currency. And so I really liked to be on the frontier. I liked to be on the frontier. And I really believed that this was the team that was going to do something really interesting. Also had a really good click with the founders. And there was like a clear need for my skill set, great relationship that we had developed over time. I was familiar with them a little bit as like a user of their product for years at Tensor. And so I decided, you know what, I think that's a great opportunity for me. And I did take some time off, but then I jumped in because you can only take so much time off. I went to the whole sit on the beach for a bit. It was fun. And then it's like, okay, now what?
That's true. Even sitting on a beach drinking a margarita every day could get tiring. Um, You bring up a good point with the financial ops piece because I remember one of the challenges of the whole multi-sig process was defining workflows and having like, proper approval chain and saying, hey, above a certain value, it's these people, having the policies in place, having the workflows in place and having some automation and reporting around that. So looks like you ended up in a good place and they found the right person for the
Been a
job.
good month and a half.
Awesome. Great to hear. Congratulations again. And thanks for taking the time to join us on the pod.
Cool. Thanks for having me. It was really, really fun. Appreciate it.